and it's much more interested in the future of the Mubarak regime than it is in the, for example, the deposed Tunisian regime, because of Egypt's strategic place in the region.
Ibrahim Arafat in the studio with me. If the administration is radically changing its tone, as Nabila's saying there, doesn't the relationship between the countries, though, still put almost a barrier in the way? Because it's such an important ally, you're not going to get, as I think a lot of Egyptian people would want the US to do right now.
I think, the calculation of the Egyptian people, is definitely different from the calculation of the American administration. The Egyptian people and the Arab, people in general, hoped that the United States would assist their liberation or the request for liberation for political emancipation for a long time. But today, I think America has to balance its own strategic interest with its obligation to respect the will of the people. This is not going to be easy, given the complexity of the Arab-Israeli conflict, which is going to appear later on as one of the decisive factors in developing the American strategy towards the democratic revolution that's going on now in the Arab world. So,
Karen.
So I think all parties involved now in the Egyptian drama, are just playing wait-and-see approach. They have started, like the American administration, they have started to put the rudimentary elements of their new strategy, but this strategy is not full-fledged yet.
Ibrahim, thank you for your thoughts on that. That's the political side of things, since we have in the last 10 minutes or so heard from the US Secretary of State Hillary Clinton saying she's deeply concerned, calling for restraint, or calling for the government in Egypt to restrain its security forces. Let's go to the phone now. On the phone, Imad Hamdi, who is an eyewitness from Bani Suef, speaking to us through a translator. Mr. Hamdi, tell me what you've seen today.
My name is Ahmad Hamdi. I'm a member of Muslim Brotherhood. I live in Bani Suef province, which is about 120 kilometers to the south of capital Cairo. As a matter of fact, incidents unfolded following the Friday sermons immediately. And demonstrations started from a square in the middle of Bani Suef downtown. People started to rally in masses, especially the young youth. What was most remarkable and noticeable is that these rallies were not moved by any political party or any political society.
We're talking to Imam Hamdi, who's a member of Muslim Brotherhood. Sorry to interrupt, sir. I wonder, though, as you say, it's...
Masses moved from all walks of life, especially the young youth. They started from the square, which is one of the most prominent squares of Bani Suef province. Rallies and demonstrations, at the beginning, the number was about 1,000 and 1,500. With the rallies marching forward, people started to join, especially the university students and undergraduates. The number has reached about 50,000 demonstrators. In a small province like Bani Suef, this number is considered to be a very sizable number compared to the number of population in other cities like Alexandria or Cairo. Demonstrators started to march towards the headquarters of the ruling party, the National Democratic Parties. They chanted slogans denouncing the unjust policies of the ruling party, which has been in rule for more than a quarter of a century. And the demands of the demonstrators were very direct and straightforward. The number one demand was for President Hosni Mubarak to step down. Hosni Mubarak is in power for more than 20 years, unlike any other Arab or European country. This was the key demand. Other demands included social welfare, freedom of expression, and one of the very important demands is to dissolve the parliament. We also called for further democracy and transparency. We also demanded that no succession should be exercised in the rule, where his son Jamal should not be presented as a candidate for presidency. The masses' unprecedented rise in cost of living and prices of commodities. With these demands by the masses, especially the young youth, they also raised a huge demand about unemployment, which has reached unprecedented rates in Egypt. This was a clear message sent out by the Egyptian people to the unjust, oppressive government. It is also a message to the whole.
We've been hearing there from Imad Hamdi. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to interrupt. He was a member of the Muslim Brotherhood, telling us that where he is, Banu Suef, which was south of Cairo, 50,000 people were out protesting today in an area like that. He says quite an astonishing number to be out on the streets in protest. To Port Said now, Esra Fihad is on the line, a spokeswoman for the Al-Baradei campaign. Of course, Mohammed Al-Baradei, an opposition leader who was briefly arrested today. Ms. Fahid, what is he doing now, as to your knowledge? Esra Fihad, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. What is Mr. Al-Baradei doing right now, to your knowledge?
We are here in Port Said. The number of protesters, about 80,000 persons. They are out there in all the streets of the city. The cops are now throwing them by tears-inducing bombs at the Mansoura, another city here in Egypt. There are violent fights between the demonstrators and the cops, and the cops shoot them. Mostly there are 3 people died. One of them is the 14-year-old kid. All what we want here is just Mubarak and his government to down and leave the country. And about Mr. Mohammed Al-Baradei,
yes.
He is surrounded at his house and prevented from getting out, and we can't contact him.
Thank you for that important information there, Esra Fihad, spokeswoman for the Al-Baradei campaign from Port Said. Just to recap what our last 2 guests have told us, Port Said, estimates of 80,000 people protesting there. Banu Suef, south of Cairo, up to 50,000. So the numbers are big everywhere. We've been focusing on Cairo, Alexandria and Suez, as you see here, but the numbers have been big everywhere. Speaking of Suez, Jamal Al-Shail, I think, on the phone now from Suez. Jamal, an update from you.
I finally made it through to the center of town, where earlier in the day there were very violent scenes that involved buildings being set alight and whatnot. Now I'm looking at, right in front of me, 3 armored vehicles and a tank. They have been literally swamped by thousands of people. Now, initially they were celebrating them and they were cheering them. However, just a few seconds ago, hundreds of these people who had gathered started running away. We're not sure why they started running away. There was some sort of bangs in the background. Very extremely unlikely there were any shots, but we're not sure what they were exactly. However, they ran for a bit and then came back. The people here that I'm speaking to say they are very relieved and happy that the army has come in. They say this is a victory that they've managed to overthrow, as they put it, the Interior Ministry and its apparatus. But it seems like there is a confusion exactly as to how the army will deal with these people. They're welcoming them, the presence of the army. However, they're unaware, or they're not sure exactly what the army will do to them. As we know, the curfew has been imposed, and this was after the violent scene. And now we can confirm that 2 people have been killed so far on Friday, prior to the army's entrance to the city. However, there is no clarity as to what the army will do. Now, these thousands of people, as I speak to you now, these thousands of people who have gathered around the vehicles are now sitting on the street rather than standing. They've decided to sit down, maybe an indication that they are not asleep.
Jamal, got to jump in there because we're getting some amazing live picture coming through from Cairo, and I think Ayman Mohyeddin is with us as well. Ayman, what do you see? Well, we can see it. Talk us through it.
Well, Kamal, just about 5 minutes ago, before our signal was interrupted, the rioters or the protesters managed to pull out a police van that was in the alleyway that I was describing for you earlier. They brought that van out to the main square right outside the hotel, outside our office building, and they torched it. After completely ripping it apart, after bashing its windows, they set it on fire, and that is what you're seeing right now. Now, that is only one of several vehicles that we've seen something similar to happen. To the right of that as well, we also saw a very similar incident whereby the police that were there, completely overwhelmed by the protesters, their vehicles as well were set on fire. Now, what we are also hearing is short distance away from where we are standing, thousands of protesters trying to storm the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which is off to the right, of where we are.
Let's just get that camera to pan back down again. There it comes, you see. Just coming into frame now. That is, if you heard earlier Ayman and I talking about a police van which was being attacked, stones being thrown at it by protesters, that's it now. It was moved out of the alleyway beside the building, torched, alight in the Cairo night. This city will not sleep tonight. There is a curfew in place. It is completely ineffective, it has to be said. Completely ineffective. The protesters have not moved. They've probably swelled in numbers, actually. Ayman, maybe you can give us an idea. Have things actually increased since the curfew came in place?
Indeed, I mean, let me tell you a few things. One, about the number of protesters. The number of protesters has certainly dispersed in terms of their numbers and their location. Now, where they were very concentrated right in front of us, we know that they are in several pockets of various parts of the city, including where they're concentrated right now outside of our office, but at the same time, adjacent to it, the radio and television building, and adjacent to that, the Ministry of Information. So we know that there are pockets of protesters. The number of them seems to have increased throughout the course of the night as it became more and more apparent that the police and the security services melted away into the city. More and more protesters have come out. That's at least been my assessment of it on the ground from where I am seeing it. Now, all these vans that you're seeing, these police vehicles that are being set on fire, from where I'm standing, I've at least seen 3 or 4 of those vehicles. There was a short while ago on this very same street that you're looking, an armored vehicle that was standing guard outside the radio and television building, make its way through that, and as it did, it was pelted with stones and sticks. For its part, I could hear that the armored vehicle was indeed firing at the protesters, but none of the protesters that we saw were injured as a result. That vehicle that you're seeing there being set on fire a short while ago, continuing to burn, just one of many. Also, just off to the left of where we're standing, as we were reporting earlier, the National Democratic Party compound also set on fire, and that continues to burn. The traffic on the 6th of October bridge that was cut off by the riot police for several hours today now seems to be completely moving. Most of the people there are pedestrians on foot. A lot of vehicles have stopped to watch what is happening, but there is no presence of police forces on the streets of Cairo in terms of where we are standing from this vantage point.
So the police completely ineffective, Ayman. The army, though, any army presence that you can see?
Indeed, Kamal, we did see the army. We saw armored personnel carriers moving down the street just underneath the 6th of October bridge. And as our camera captured when that happened, they were completely overwhelmed by the cheers of the protesters. The protesters gathered. They jumped on the armored vehicle. They shook hands with some of the personnel, the soldiers that were in that vehicle. And then they ultimately left it. And so the army is, we've seen the army on the streets, or at least we've seen the armed forces on the streets. We don't know yet what capacity or what role they're playing. What we do know, according to Egyptian state media, is that the president has ordered the military deployed across the city to help provide reinforcements. But from what we've seen in terms of the reaction of the people, it was much more celebratory and welcoming towards the military, as opposed to the police forces. And that is a very important